Hi, it's Andy. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're also doing some good. We're here with Jeff Horonzy. Jeff is an emergency medical services helicopter pilot, and Jeff is going to walk us through everything it takes to become a helicopter pilot, the ups and downs of the job, the ins and outs, the downright challenging, and we are starting right now.
So as an EMS helicopter pilot, our primary job is critical care patient transport. So that may be from the scene of a car accident on a highway. It could be a dirt biker out there in the middle of the desert who's recreating. It could be a mountain biker, could be a motorcycle, could be basically anybody. And we even do flights out of small hospitals and transfer them to facilities with a higher level of care. So on a day-to-day basis, the job can mean many things. On board, I am the sole pilot. We also typically have two medical personnel who ride behind me and do provide the patient care. But I'm the only pilot, so I'm up there flying all by myself. As the sole pilot on board, my main responsibility is to safely operate the aircraft. As I mentioned, we're in the business of transporting people who are sick or injured. However, I'm solely supposed to focus on flying the aircraft. My day-to-day is coming into work, getting the aircraft pre-flighted, ready to go, making sure everything looks good and is safe for flight. I constantly check the weather and stay ahead of it if we have any weather systems moving in, so on and so forth. When we do get our flight request, I should be ready to go. And it's my job to determine whether or not we can safely conduct that flight. So when the request comes in, I get the first right of refusal per se. Once we get airborne, I'm the one navigating appropriately to the location where we're going to be picking up our patient, and then I'm the one navigating to the hospital. So as I mentioned earlier, my job is to fly the helicopter. I have no medical training. I'm not providing any medical care on board while I'm flying. They want me to focus solely on the flying of the aircraft. Now, once we do land at the hospital, it's my job to make sure the aircraft's ready to go for a secondary flight. So I'm going to be refueling the aircraft, servicing the oxygen as needed, and making sure everything is going to perform as needed if we do get a second flight. Additionally, I do help out the crew members moving the patient off the gurney into the hospital, carrying their bags, helping them organize some of their medical equipment if needed. But as previously stated, the main function of my job is to make sure the aircraft is ready to go for the next flight and then to operate that aircraft in a safe manner. So a typical day for me as an EMS helicopter pilot is coming into work. I do a quick briefing with the off-going pilot, check the weather, check in with our dispatch center, advise them of our crew configuration for the day. Then I go out there and I pre-flight the aircraft to make sure everything looks good mechanically, make sure we're fueled and everything is ready to go in the event that we do get a flight request. Yeah, we could get requested at a moment's notice, so I have to kind of stay ahead of the game in that regard, knowing what the weather conditions are, knowing the conditions of the aircraft, and basically knowing if I'm going to be able to conduct a flight safely. So if we do get a request, typically our dispatch center notifies us. We get toned out very similar to like a fire station or an ambulance gets toned out, notifying us of where the request is coming from. When the request goes out, we only know of where it is. We don't know of exactly what it is, so we're unaware of the patient condition. They don't want me to base my decision on the condition of the patient. They just want me to make my decision on the location and if I can conduct that flight safely. We do a quick walk around, make sure the aircraft is suitable to fly, and we all get on board. As the pilot, I start the aircraft, get everything up and running. And then once we get airborne, I type in the coordinates for the location that we're headed to, and we head that way. The whole time I'm in touch with our dispatch center. They're keeping us up to date on any changes in patient conditions or if they want us to deviate to an alternate location. So we're always in contact with our dispatch center. I'm the one doing all the air traffic communications with air traffic control, other aircraft, as well as our comm center. Once we get overhead of our location, if it happens to be on scene, like on a highway or in the backcountry, I'm the one who's contacting any units who may be on the ground. If there aren't any units on the ground, it's up to us to respond as the sole responders. So we're able to secure our own landing zones, and sometimes we have to land a little bit away from where the patient is if they happen to be in a location where we can't land. And once we determine it is safe, we go ahead and come in and land. I typically stay in the aircraft, and a lot of times we don't even turn the aircraft off. We keep everything running. The crew will go out, they'll tend to the patient, do any medical care as needed, and if it's appropriate for us to transfer the patient, we load up the helicopter with the patient and we fly him to the closest appropriate medical facility. So as the pilot, my job is to determine the best route of flight, if there's going to be any weather that's going to affect our flight to that facility, so on and so forth. So the type of person that would be good as an EMS helicopter pilot is someone who's willing to work with a team. Now, even though I'm the only pilot on board, I'm constantly interacting with my fellow crew members. And as a crew, we're determining that the flight can be conducted safely. So even though I'm the only one on the actual controls, we're still interacting through the entire course of the flight. Even once we have a patient on board, I'm keeping them up to date of changing weather conditions, whether or not we need to deviate. Since a big part of my job is checking weather, checking the aircraft, staying ahead of whether or not a flight can be safely conducted, this job really suits someone who's big on aviation. We're all aviation buffs. We're constantly reading about helicopter stories. We're constantly reading about our own aircraft, increasing our knowledge. So a willingness to learn and just enjoy aviation is a huge part of this career as well. So this job is very unique in that we are in close quarters with individuals who may be sick or injured. So if you get a little queasy, you don't like to see blood, and you just don't want to be around people who are sick or hurt, it's probably not going to be the job for you. Even though I don't provide any medical care, the patient's right there next to me. So I see what's going on. I see my crew members providing that care. So if I'm unable to handle that emotionally or just don't want to see it, it's probably not going to be the job for someone. So someone who wouldn't make a good EMS pilot is someone who can't deal with a lot of stress. We are always thinking on our feet, thinking on our toes, making very quick decisions that can have a big impact rather quickly, especially if we make the wrong decision. So dealing with stress is a huge part of the job. Additionally, we deal with a lot of different personalities from our crew members. So having the ability to interact with people of various personalities is very critical in this job. Additionally, being able to receive direction from crew members, from our dispatch center, and from responders who may not necessarily be a pilot, but may have questions or concerns, and being able to appropriately address those is a huge part of the job. So if you're unable to receive input or direction from individuals, it's probably not going to be the best job for you. So believe it or not, you don't necessarily need to have a 4-year college degree in order to be a pilot. Being a pilot is very similar to learning a trade. In flight school is almost like a vocational school where you earn certain levels of certification as you progress in experience. So a lot of people think you need to go to college to be a pilot, and that's not always true. There are many routes that one can take to actually gain the necessary certifications and experience to become a pilot. One of the most common routes is going through the military. Typically it takes around, I would say, 1 to 2 years of relatively consistent training to reach the point where you can get a job working as a pilot. The various routes that one could potentially take to become a pilot are the military route. One can go to a civilian flight school, which is very similar to a trade school. And there are a lot of university programs that also have a 4-year degree in addition to offering flight training. So those are 3 routes that one can take to potentially become a commercial pilot. All right. So I kind of started flying just for fun. I wasn't sure I wanted to make it a career at first. but it seemed interesting, seemed like an adventure, so I learned to fly airplanes first, believe it or not. And after getting my private license to fly airplanes, I always saw the helicopters flying around and it piqued my interest, and I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot, and I fell in love with flying helicopters. So I progressed through all my ratings in both airplanes and helicopters in the event that I needed a job that would require flying airplanes as well. But I never actually worked as a commercial airplane pilot, even though I'm certified to do so. I was lucky enough to get a job working as a helicopter flight instructor as soon as I completed all my helicopter ratings. For the first 2 years of my career, I also flew tours, charters, did a lot of aerial photography. After that, I was lucky enough to get a job flying helicopter tours in the Grand Canyon out of Las Vegas. While I was doing that, I also began flying heliskiing operations in Colorado and Alaska in the winter months. And then I decided I wanted to settle down, have a job that was a little more stable. So I started flying EMS down in Arizona. Did that for a couple of years, and then I moved up to the Lake Tahoe area, and I've been flying EMS here for almost 6 years now. So it's been a lot of fun. I've seen a lot of places, flown across the country, flown from California to Alaska multiple times, and it's been amazing. I found that in the Grand Canyon, your entry-level position was about $65,000 per year, but some of the higher paying tour operators would pay their pilots pretty well, and it wasn't that difficult to make 6 figures per year. Now, as an air medical helicopter pilot, once again, your pay is going to vary quite a bit depending on your location. Areas with a higher cost of living are going to have incentives and pay their pilots higher than areas with a lower cost of living. So once again, your entry-level EMS pilot's probably going to be starting out around the $80,000 range, but you can easily make over $100,000, even $150,000 per year if you're in the right spot. So in addition to the flying, which we get to do in one of the most beautiful areas of the country, helping people is a big reward that comes with doing this job. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we go out there, we respond to people who are very sick or very injured, and ideally we put them in a situation where they can recover, get them to the hospital as quickly as possible. Even though I don't do any medical care, it's definitely rewarding at the end of the day knowing that I got them to the hospital safely.